In a small village, a man named Bhushan sat down for his only meal of the day. Before he could take a single bite, a starving beggar arrived at his door. Bhushan immediately pushed his plate across the table, choosing to go hungry so a stranger could eat. His selflessness extended to physical labor. Later that same day, running entirely on an empty stomach, he stepped in to help a neighbor carry 10 heavy sacks of grain from the fields, exhausting himself for someone else's benefit. He also demonstrated rare moral courage. When a neighbor began beating his wife in public, the rest of the community simply watched. Bhushan intervened directly, physically stopping the abuse and publicly shaming the attacker. These compounding acts of extreme goodwill built an undeniable reserve of social capital. The villagers recognized his integrity and collectively elected him as their new Sarpanch, or village headman, effectively displacing the established power structure. The ousted headman, Sarpanch Singh, watched this transition with absolute fury. Stripped of his authority and status, he immediately began searching for a way to destroy Bhushan's pristine reputation. This flowchart illustrates the sabotage. Clean grain entered the distribution hub, but Sarpanch Singh secretly injected a dark, adulterated substance into the rations. When tainted supplies reached the villagers, their immediate outrage bypassed the saboteur entirely, falling directly on the distributor, Bhushan. The punishment was remarkably swift. The very people who had championed his integrity days earlier turned completely on their new leader, aggressively exiling him from the community. Pure goodness has a core vulnerability. Public perception is incredibly fragile, and it can be easily hacked by a bad actor who targets a community's basic survival needs. Sitting alone in exile, Bhushan realized that pure honesty is often defenseless against a rigged system. To fight back, he had to employ strategic deception. Instead of trying to logically convince an angry mob of his innocence, he launched a targeted disinformation campaign designed to create a false sense of security in his enemy. He planted a specific lie into the village rumor mill that he had retreated to an abandoned forest hut and, overwhelmed by the shame of the accusations, had taken his own life. The Whisper Network did its job. Within days, 2 men discussing the rumor were overheard by Sarpanch Singh's servant, who immediately carried the news back to his master. Hearing the news, the corrupt former headman felt a wave of absolute relief. He believed his rival was gone and his problem was permanently erased. Bhushan utilized a psychological mechanism known as confirmation bias. By feeding his antagonist the exact outcome he desperately wanted to hear, he prompted Sarpanch Singh to drop all of his defenses. Weeks passed, the village settled back into its old rhythm. But late one evening, a dense, dark atmosphere settled over Sarpanch Singh's isolated compound. Bhushan stood perfectly still in the mist, allowing his silhouette to pass for a vengeful spirit returning from the grave. The psychological break was instantaneous. The servant took one look at the apparition, panicked completely, and fled the property, leaving the terrified Sarpanch entirely alone. Bhushan advanced on the paralyzed Sarpanch Singh and delivered a ruthless ultimatum: publicly confess the truth immediately or face the wrath of the dead. Bhushan required no physical weapons. He instead triggered the perpetrator's own suppressed guilt, turning a bad conscience into paralyzing, irrational paranoia. Driven by absolute terror, Sarpanch Singh scrambled into the village in the middle of the night, frantically waking his neighbors and demanding they gather. Standing before the confused crowd, he delivered a desperate confession. He admitted that he and his servant were the ones who had adulterated the food supply to frame Bhushan. At that moment, Bhushan stepped out of the shadows and into the lantern light, revealing to the stunned village that he was very much alive. This sting operation used a fabricated lie to act as a psychological pressure cooker, forcing the truth to explode into public view. The consequences were immediate. Recognizing their own gullibility, the community formally exiled the corrupt Sarpanch Singh and offered Bhushan a deep collective apology. Bhushan was reinstated as the village Sarpanch, his reputation restored, and his authority now unquestionable. In a world where corrupt systems exploit the innocent, protecting the community requires the strategic intelligence to outmaneuver evil at its own game.